Our post-lunch first session is with Mr. Pavan Kumar Varma, writer, diplomat, and National General Secretary of Janata Dal United. Mr. Varma has been a prolific writer and has written books on a diverse set of subjects. His latest book, ladies and gentlemen, is on the great Hindu thinker, Adi Shankaracharya. Mr. Varma will be talking to us about the science behind Hinduism. Give him a big round of applause, please.
Good afternoon. I have still to catch my breath because I came running up the steps, and my apologies for being a little late. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking on Hinduism and its correlation with science. And I'm grateful to the Avanee Foundation and the Dalmia Group for organizing this seminar and giving me an opportunity to speak to you. The relationship between any religious philosophy and science is a curious one. I'd say it's curious because so long as science believes it has all the answers, it believes philosophy is quite irrelevant. And in the past it has happened at a time when science has been taking great strides and it seemed as if the world is entirely explicable, that philosophy was an optional pursuit of those who had a little more spare time for things. In fact, in the 19th century, the famous German philosopher said that God is dead, because it appeared that science had the answer to everything. That was the era of Newton and gravity, and the sheer transparency of what the world was about seemed so complete, so completely convincing, that there was even the audacious statement that God is dead. In our own time, Stephen Hawking once famously said, philosophy is dead. And that is when he too felt that science has all the answers and there is no need to go into the uncharted areas of philosophical speculation. But obviously science doesn't have all the answers. And it is then that you go back to philosophy. And the singularly unique thing about philosophy and Hinduism is that it was from the very beginning. From the very beginning, it was not a search for God. It was a search for what could be the underlying and enduring truth behind this universe and our small, puny lives. Even 5,000 years ago, when seers, saints, and thinkers sat in a forest, speaking with a bunch of disciples, and that has now been put down as the Upanishads, the question and answer, the dialogue was about what could be the truth. It was not about what is Ishwar, what is divinity, what is God, what is something that we visualize as an extension of our own little worlds. And from that remarkable dialogue, with great and elliptical insights like Tattvam Asi, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Atma Brahm, Pragyanam Brahm, the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. And on that basis and on other aspects of Hindu philosophy, when the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy came up, the Sankhya, Yoga, the Nyaya, Vaisheshik, the Purv Mimansh, the Uttar Mimansh, I can tell you at least 5 were technically atheist. Because they were not seeking to find God. They were again seeking to find what could be the truth. And it is precisely there that you find the congruence in a sense between philosophy and science. Because science, if it is truly true to the reason why it is pursued, is a search for truth, the essentiality underlying the bewildering plurality of this universe and our lives. And philosophy, when it is also a search for truth, becomes like science. Except that philosophers don't have the tools of science. Philosophers have the philosopher's eye. And in those moments of the deepest contemplation and insight, perhaps they are able to come about on truths which could be validated by science. So, for instance, one of the most revolutionary concepts of the Advaita school of thought, of which Adi Shankaracharya, my book, Hinduism's Greatest Thinker, was the notion of Brahm. It was enunciated in the Upanishads but built into a structured philosophy, a rigorously structured philosophy by Adi Shankaracharya. The notion of Brahm is revolutionary. Imagine in your mind that a notion is elaborated upon millennia ago, of an entity which is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, which is Anant Anadi, which is Adrisht, beyond seeing, Achintya, beyond thought, which is Akhand, indivisible, Avibhajya, which is undifferentiated consciousness, Nirvishesh Chinmatram, which is all-knowing intelligence, Sarva Pratyaya Darshanin, which is complete in itself in all aspects, which is Purna, which is a pulsating energy permeating the entire cosmos, Ekras, and which is, above all, Nirguna, attributeless. This concept is revolutionary. And on that basis of that concept, there are certain insights that came up. And that is the correlation with science. I have a chapter in my book called The Remarkable Validation of Science. And let me preface what I'm going to say by telling you that this is not a simplistic or chauvinist attempt to show, as some people now have a tendency to do, to show that everything that is happening today happened in the past in our country. We had internet, planes, rockets, perhaps even mobile phones. This is not that kind of attempt, because that kind of attempt devalues, in some manner, both the great refinements of our legacy and, I'm afraid, the intellect of the person who propagates such a view. This is a serious attempt to see whether some concepts coincide and are being validated today or not. And I will give you a few instances the time is brief. For instance, the notion of Brahm is that it is amatra, it is infinite. Today, cosmology tells us that our solar system is part of a galaxy called the Milky Way. The Milky Way is 150,000 light years across. Light travels at the speed of roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. So that's vast enough. But now cosmology, with the new eyes in the sky, the telescopes, is telling us that there are at least 125 billion more such galaxies, each with at least 200 billion stars, half of which are larger than the sun. When philosophers spoke about Koti Brahmand, imagine the mind-boggling size of this universe. But today cosmology is also telling us that this already mind-bogglingly large universe continues to expand every second at the speed of light. What is it expanding into? Does it create space, or is there space beyond? A simple analogy to explain what is happening is that if you have 3 dots on a balloon and you blow air into the balloon, the dots begin to spread away from each other. This universe continues to expand infinitely per second at the speed of light. And then Stephen Hawking says, among others, that there is nothing to disprove the fact that there is not just one universe, but there could be multiverses. So when Hindu philosophers said that the Brahmand is amatra infinite, sitting in the forests on the outskirts of a small city thousands of years ago, much before Galileo. Today cosmology is proving it. Advait Soch says that Brahm is Anant, it's eternal. Today cosmology is established that the universe as we know it is 13.7 billion years old. But that is not enough for scientists. Scientists want to know that even though it may be 13.7 billion years old, how did it begin? And so there came about a popular theory called the Big Bang theory, Mahavispot, that when from an infinitesimally small speck there occurred at a certain moment of time a revolutionary inflationary expansion that led to the creation of this universe. So science seemed to have found a neat answer to a beginning. But then scientists began to ask themselves that if there could have been a big bang which led to this inflationary expansion, what prevents a big crunch happening? In other words, this universe which expanded, like a film being rewound, begins to collapse on itself and goes back to that infinitesimally small speck. And so scientists today speak not only of the Big Bang, but of the big crunch, that it could all start again. And actually, Hindu philosophy says that it is chakriya, it is eternal. It is anadi, it is anant, it is without beginning and without end. Na utpatti hai, na grahan hai, anant hai. And if you see sometimes more closely the iconographic presentation of Shiva in Tandav, it's a remarkable exemplification of the eternality of time. A flame of fire, the most dynamic posture of Shiva. And Shiva has flame in one hand, showing the transience of the universe. The damru in the other, primeval sound. A hand extended as blessing and a hand towards the feet as a conquest of ignorance. And the flame is moving so fast that it seems like a circle of light. But in all of this movement, the face is still. It's calm, it's poised, it's equipoised, it is full of equanimity. And time moves on. Brahm says that underlying this universe there has to be a supreme intelligence. That intelligence may not correspond to our categories of either right or wrong or what could be intelligent, but there is a supreme intelligence. And you see that in the working of the universe. There is a precision to this whole madness which takes you aback. The exact time of sunrise, sunset, change of seasons. There is obviously to this pulsating energy permeating the conscious world, the cosmos, attributeless energy, there is an intelligence behind it. That's why it's called Sarva Pratyaya Darshan. Brahm says the whole notion of Maya. People misunderstand Maya. Maya does not mean that the empirical world does not exist. It exists, but it is not real in the ontological sense, in the absolute sense. जो अस्थाई है, जो अस्थिर है, जो परिवर्तनशील है, वो सत्य नहीं हो सकता. That which is changing, that which is unstable, that which is transient cannot be the truth. This is the insight of a philosopher. And therefore this bewildering polarity is a manifestation of a cause which is unchanging. That cause is enduring, everlasting, eternal, ever present. What its representation may happen at one finite moment of time can be transient, changing, passing, ephemeral. That is why in Advait Soch, it's not Parivartanvad, it is Vivartvad. The cause does not change. जो नाम रूप है, the manifestations can change, come into being and pass away, but that original cause does not change. And examples are many that you find in Hindu philosophy. For instance, that of clay. You can have a pot, glass made of clay, a ghada made of clay, so many forms can come, but the underlying cause is clay. There can be ornaments of gold in this room and many forms, but the underlying cause is gold. So you have to keep in a reductionist manner going back to what is that cause? That cause is real. Its manifestation is subject to the cycle of birth and death. That which is transient cannot be real. And so this whole world, notion of Maya, where there is this nanatva, this bewildering plurality that we see, we live with, which comes into being and goes. And Advait Soch or Hinduism says it is and it is not. It is the mishran of Sat and Asat. And how is it proven by science today? With the advent of quantum physics, which is an examination of the nanoscopic world, the micro world, the whole notion of physical reality has changed. We lived in a simpler world of proton, neutron, electron. Now there are at least 200 to 250 subparticles. And you, as I see you, is what my sensory faculties make of you, otherwise you are just empty space with waves of energy. 96% of the universe is dark matter about which we know nothing. And then came a man called Einstein, who was a clerk in a patent's office, who said even time and space are relative. What you see is not what you see. When you see the sun rise in the morning and you see the sun, it is not the sun as it is. It is as the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. Because that is the time light takes to travel from the sun to you. So if in those 8 minutes the sun would have ceased to exist, you would still see it. In the evening when you go out and you see this abundance of stars, many of them, because the furthest galaxy away from us is 45 billion light years away. Please turn these figures in your mind. And light from that galaxy will take 30 billion light years to reach us. So, what you see of that star today is not the star, because the star may have actually collapsed on itself several million years ago. It's only the light that has reached you now. Even the moon, and so many people are compared to Chand Samukhra, was 1.3 seconds ago what you see. That's the relativity of time, the relativity of space. Somewhere the Mahabharata is on, because somebody is seeing it now. So in any case, time is relative, space is relative, and the famous equation, energy is mass, mass is energy. Everything ultimately gets reduced to that energy. And even mass is a representation of that energy. And the nanoscopic world shows a particle is a wave is a particle. At the time of measurement, either can become either. It's a remarkable world. So what you see is not what the world is. Because that which is transient, where it comes into existence for 1 nanosecond and then disappears, cannot be real. But there is a cause behind it, which is real. Brahm, for instance, says, Advait Soch said Brahm is indivisible, akhand. Now it's a concept. Philosophers outline a concept which they see in the deepest moments of, as I said, insight. Then you correlate to science. In the 1930s, now it's been fairly long, the sheer indivisibility of this mind-bogglingly large convex cosmos has been proven by science. And I don't have the time. Book has more examples, but just one experiment I will allude to. It's called the EPR experiment, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiment. If you take 2 electrons and split them, take one to Seattle, or if you like to the moon, and one is here. The moment you put them back into the exact axis, the quantum of spin remains the same, but the moment you measure one, the other acquires a counterclockwise or clockwise direction. So if one goes like this, the other goes like this, at the time of measurement. Now this happens instantaneously. That's what the EPR experiment is about. And scientists say that if it happens instantaneously, this is faster than even the speed of light. How does one know that at the time of the measurement, the other has to immediately acquire a counter or clockwise direction. How does it happen? So every aspect of the universe is in some manner connected to each other as part of one indivisible whole. It is a Khand. Advait Soch says that underlying all this great urja, this great pulsating energy, there has to be a consciousness. That energy is not inert. It is consciousness personified. Today, Nobel laureates, Max Planck, Erwin Schrödinger, they are all saying that ultimately the only way the universe becomes in some manner explicable is not through further experiments in science, but the acceptance of the fact that consciousness is primary, matter is derivative. And you can read their works to see why they say it finally. Even Einstein said it. Einstein said, I can't believe that there is something that is not comprehensible to science, that God plays dice. But ultimately he says, I've stepped into a realm where I cannot but accept the fact that there seems to be, behind all of this, a consciousness that eludes the scientific instruments we use. That is why in the Upanishads they said, Pragyanam Brahm. Brahm is consciousness. And finally, among many other examples, one of the postulates at least of Hinduism is that Brahm, which is universal, and within us the Atma are essentially the same. Ayam Atma Brahm. And scientific experiments which are going on, including in Harvard and abroad, have come to this remarkable conclusion. And Dr. Andrew Newberg has written a book which I recommend to all of you called Why God Won't Go Away. Why God Won't Go Away. And in these experiments, they are showing that the brain, which is essentially a material substance, seems to have an inherent capacity of self-transcendence, whereby even though it is a material substance, it has within itself the capacity to become a sakshi, an observer. Human beings are different, let's say, from the animal world because they have over and above the instinctive faculties, the faculty of cognition, of thought. And now scientists are saying that the brain has in it, even though a material substance, this capacity of becoming an observer to its own actions. Now look at the analysis, look at the conclusion today, and I'll tell you how they proved it also. And look at what, for instance, what Adi Shankaracharya says. Adi Shankaracharya analyzes the mind very carefully. He says, I'm summarizing, I'm simplifying it. He says it consists of three elements. Buddhi, intellect. Ahankar, a sense of I-ness. And Chitta, awareness. That Chit, Sat, Chit, Anand, that Chit is its essential nature. But why does that Chit become somehow eclipsed, marginalized, sidelined, overwhelmed? Because of Buddhi and Ahamkar. Now the Buddhi is a great tool, the intellect. But the Buddhi also is part of the mind, and the mind is never ever unless by constant practice you train it ever still. One thought, second thought, third thought, as Buddha said, like one monkey jumping from one branch of a tree to another, it remains permanently and actively, often fairly sterilely active. Even at night when you wake up, the mind is working, churning away, and not still. It's never quiet. The sense of ahamkar is, I think, one of the biggest follies the human mind invents. That I am the center of the universe, the mind, the I, the me, that because of this little world, and the ultimate irony is that we are defined by our little worlds. If for some of you who understand a little Urdu, I'll read a couplet, I'll narrate a couplet. Khule sehra mein thi meri asiri deed ke kabil. In the open horizon, my imprisonment was worth watching. खुले सहरा में थी मेरी असीरी दीद के काबिल, मेरी हद्दे निगह के 400 दीवार बन जाना. My own abilities not to see beyond become the four walls around me. And that is what ahankar is. Otherwise, what is the invention? What is the invention of the I? Not even a bubble on the foam for a minute. Not even a nanosecond. And we build entire edifices around it. Same thing with Sufism. Same thing with Sikhism. Ek Omkar. That is it. Sufism, they say, न था कुछ तो खुदा था. गालिब से न था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ न होता तो खुदा होता. डुबोया मुझको होने ने, न मैं होता तो क्या होता. मैं. So ahamkar. You quieten the mind by practice. You reduce the sense of I-ness, ahamkar. And like a mirror being cleaned of all the grime on it, what shines forth is that chitta, awareness, that sakshi, that observer. But this is the insight of a philosopher. Now what are they doing in the neurology labs? I'll finish. I can finish when you want or speak for another 1 hour. I'll take a minute. What are they doing in the neurology labs? Here is a practiced meditationer. He sits down to meditate. He has a string tied to his little finger. The moment he is slipping into the deepest moment of meditation, he gives a little tug to that string. That alerts the doctors. They do a speck of his brain. And they find that in that deepest moment of meditation, when the mind is stilled and the sense of I-ness is dissipated, what the person experiences is that chit which is defined by unalloyed, blemishless, total sense of joy and fulfillment. Satchidanand. In fact, Andrew Newberg calls it AUB, absolute unitary being, where you dissolve with the cosmos and become whole and become fulfilled, not in a future heaven, but Brahm Anubhav can happen to anyone at any time today. We are that. Tat Tvam Asi. That is what the philosopher said, and that is what science is saying now. Thank you so much.
मुश्किल को समझने का तरीका निकल आता, क्योंकि आपने शेर सुनाया तो मुश्किल को समझने का तरीका निकल आता, तुम बात तो करते कोई रास्ता निकल आता, तो बहुत सारे रास्ते बातें करने से निकल आते हैं. Thank you, Mr. Varma. May I now request Avanee Dalmia to please present a little memento to Mr. Varma.
I hope it's not my book.